Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Reimagine v13. I'm excited to be talking about all things Parachains, interoperability, as we're covering the Polkadot ecosystem as a whole. I'm your host, Roshan Mirajkar from the MouseBelt team, and really excited to be discussing in our panel today, protocol development in Web3. Before we get into it, let's meet all of our great guests for today. I'll have everyone introduce themselves, where they're from, and you guys can even cover a little bit about, your background. So we'll start with you, Gregory.
All right, awesome. Hi guys, my name is Greg. I'm a senior Rust engineer for Interlay. We're working on InterBTC, decentralized trustless Bitcoin protocol. We're offering KBTC on the Kintsugi Kusama-based network and IBTC on the Interlay Polkadot-based Parachain. My background, I've been in crypto for a number of years now, and I'm super excited to see where I think Polkadot and Kusama offer great sort of interoperability between different teams, and I'm super excited to explore all the different avenues of protocol development that will unfold there. And I'm based in Edinburgh, Scotland. So with that, I guess I'll hand back to Roshan or whoever is going next.
Yeah, Alen, you can go next.
Thank you. Yes, I'm Alen. I'm the leader of the technical development of the Moonbeam and Moonweaver parachain, which are EVM-focused parachain on the Polkadot ecosystem. I was mostly a software engineer, but now I'm mostly managing the team and the project.
Got it. And lastly, Mohamed.
Hi, everyone. I'm Mohamed. I am a member of Web3 Labs, which we are a partner with Icon Foundation. And for the past year or so, we've been working with Icon on the BTD Interoperability project. And recently this year, we kicked off the build out of the ICE network, by which I'm one of the key technical leads on the project to focus on the building the runtime and all things related to the parachain and substrate configuration.
Yeah, awesome. Excited to have you guys here. I know you guys are going to help break down a lot of these technical concepts so people can understand the value of Polkadot and the ecosystem. Let's sort of get into the discussion. And the first question I'll throw to Gregory. So I think let's start off by kind of discussing, what is it about the Polkadot architecture that you found, your project and what you're doing right now, why are you building on Polkadot? What makes it so special?
So I guess the prime benefit is obviously it affords sort of a layer one type architecture comparatively with like typical smart contracts. So we could have adopted some sort of Ethereum contracting, but we would have that would be a lot more involved, and there's a lot more nuances where I believe substrate offers a lot of flexibility. So to go back to my argument, because it's a layer one, it offers a few nice things, such as like we can customize everything, right? So for example, transaction fees, we can completely customize that depending on how we want and where. If we were deployed, say, on Ethereum, we're subject to the gas metering model, regardless of what the contract does. We can actually make certain actions in our layer one cheaper, depending on if it is conform to the protocol or not. So for us, I think that's the biggest kind of draw. For myself, I guess I would also have to mention like Rust and working with Rust, because as a language, it's offers also a lot of flexibility, and I quite like working with it. So that's not afforded to by many other, apart from I believe Solana and maybe some ongoing work by some Tendermint people. Polkadot / Web3 is the main place to go for sort of Rust development on the blockchain side.
Yeah, it'll be interesting as this discussion goes on to hear more about like non-EVM world or partial EVM world. Yeah, we'll go to Mohamed next. Kind of break down. Yeah, why did your team pick Polkadot, and maybe tell the audience like what are some benefits you've seen building on it.
Sure. First of all, like Polkadot as an ecosystem speaks a lot to the story of Icon. Although Icon started a little bit earlier the network itself being an interoperability hub through that smart contract and BTB, it enables it by providing abstraction and so on, and wants to be, or the vision of it is just being a network of networks. The same story that Polkadot talks about is being a network of networks. So the maximalism here is coming from the fact that you want to further extend the idea of network effects and bring on the different or diverse number of people with different ideas onto that ecosystem. But in addition to the technical reasons that Gregory mentioned, you have this modular framework, which is a substrate. It's really ships with a lot of let's say palettes that is parity already built for you that you can just pick and choose and try to put together almost like a Lego. Allows you to build and customize how you want to have your network, how you want to customize it, and how do you want to, let's say, areas where you think you need to specialize, or maybe you want to fine tune, or you want to dedicate that network for a particular type of networks or applications. And then it brought that sort of, it went to like one layer down from, let's say, Ethereum being a measurably smart contract network and or blockchain, and as well as a dApp hub. It also enables the ability of developers just want to build more native code to the network, so you can actually have a specialized palette that runs native to the node itself, and effectively it's more compute efficient in that sense. There's many other reasons as well that we can speak about, but that's in summary what we think Polkadot is good for.
Yeah, 100%. Instead of it being like, general purpose, a blockchain, you actually have like specific purposes. That's something I've really understood, and something I really like about the Polkadot ecosystem. Alen, I'll go to you, but I'll ask you a more specific question. So how can platforms like Moonbeam kind of keep up with all the changes happening on Polkadot substrate and Ethereum? Because I know you guys sort of sitting in the middle and helping both ecosystems.
Yeah, that's definitely an interesting question, and I feel like it's particular because in our case we have two kind of opposite system in terms of like development workflow. On one side we have Ethereum, which is already was production ready a long time ago and needs to have a big stability. So the development workflow on Ethereum is actually pretty slow. You get upgrade on Ethereum every 6 months. It's kind of slow because the stability is the most important part in what they're trying to achieve. On the other side, we have Polkadot and Substrate, and it's a kind of new network. There's still a lot of ideas to develop on it, a lot of features to implement. And I think over the last 3 years, they have been focused on improving fast without focusing too much on the stability. So on our side, it's, because we are focused, our main priority is the Ethereum compatibility. We always try to guarantee following exactly what Ethereum is doing. That's our main priority. And then we adapt what Polkadot is doing and providing to match this priority. And I think it comes back to the few points that were mentioned before. One is the flexibility of Substrate, which has been very amazing and is very good for us because we have, for example, a different account system that all the other Parachains. That's helping us a lot. But also the fact that we chose Polkadot was because of the team they have. They have really amazing engineers. We work a lot with them. We discuss different designs and ideas. And I feel like that's a very advantage. So for us, in terms of working with those two technology, we really like it. I think it combines very well the fact that one is very fast, the other one it's slower, and it comes back to understanding the changes that are happening in both part and being able to make it compatible.
I think that was a very balanced answer. Like you're following, kind of what Ethereum is doing, but you're also adding your own twist to it. So I think that's pretty interesting. And let's continue down this path, kind of talking about interoperability, because I think it naturally comes up, the discussions around Polkadot. I'll go to you, Gregory, for this one. Can you talk a little bit about, what do you see the future of the world being like? Is everything just going to be focused on interoperability? And why is Interlay so focused on kind of bringing DeFi interoperability to Bitcoin?
Okay, well, a very kind of wide question, but I'll try and narrow it down a bit. I think, the future in the short term certainly is like all about interoperability, and we've already seen that, right, with Polkadot/Kusama and Cosmos, and even some of the other chains and bridges kind of springing up out of the place everywhere. In fact, I recently attended ETH Denver, and that was the primary talk about everyone really was bridges and what's happening in the space, what's going wrong, what's going right, and that's certainly where we're going. Like the idea, at least also for Interlay, our primary goal is to make sure the assets can be accessed on any chain, or any asset on any chain, and everywhere. And the reason we kind of picked it, obviously, we kind of, that's our sort of general mission statement. And we started with Bitcoin because obviously it's the biggest chain out there. It's got the most liquidity, and tapping that into DeFi markets is invaluable. Certainly in the case of Polkadot, but also we've seen with Ethereum, right, with WBTC and some of the other wrapped Bitcoin assets. The market's huge, and there's a lot of capital to unlock. So I guess that would be the reason that we wanted to bring kind of Bitcoin, and we also, like, as a more direct consequence of that, we've noticed that a lot of the bridges that are currently in operation for wrapping Bitcoin are mostly centralized. So our goal is to kind of build something that's backed by a lot of research to make it as fully trustless as possible, which we also feel is kind of under-specified in the space at the moment.
Yeah, I think it's super cool.
Yeah,
no, I think it's super cool that you guys are kind of trying to bring more use cases, usability to Bitcoin, like you said, something that's already existing. And I'll throw it to you next, Alen, if you want to talk about what are some other interesting use cases that you've seen, or maybe that you want to see that we get with more cross-chain applications.
Yeah, the way I see real benefits with those cross-chain development is the fact that now teams and projects can decide where they want to go because they have some preferred network or interest into some specific features, and still benefit from the other ones. Let's take, for example, games, because games, we always enjoy it, so it's easy, and it's easy to think about. When you're like a game developer, you would think that you need a blockchain that is fast enough for what you want to do. Like if you have a fast-paced game, for example, you want a blockchain, let's say, with a short block time, but you don't want to sacrifice on other parts that are interesting for your business, like the asset management of your games, those kind of things. And maybe the blockchain that has a very low block time sacrifices some kind of security part of the blockchain, to make sure, because it's always a trade-off, the features in those cases. And so you would benefit from having a very fast blockchain on one side, and you will be able to use your assets through cross-bridge into another blockchain. And that's like, I see the benefits. The more we get different blockchain matching a standard and offering different features, the more we'll be able to provide like use cases on with more complex scenarios and more interesting things to do. We can also think about, a multi-instance system where your project requires to be on multiple blockchain, and you still want to synchronize basically your data or whatever information that is important to your business across those blockchain. And having a cross-chain system with like some security assigned to it allows you to do that in a safe way.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, we've seen all these other hacks, on Ethereum and stuff like that, because everyone is trying to bridge over. So I definitely think people should look into Polkadot because it has some of those problems solved. I wouldn't say completely, but you don't see like similar hacks, so it's interesting. Mohamed, do you have any final thoughts on interesting use cases that you see from kind of bridging over, building cross-chain applications? Like, is it more like decentralized applications or something else?
There are different possibilities. I mean, one example I just could think of now, in addition to what you mentioned, is maybe areas where enterprise or CBCDs, for example, or let's say privacy is important for a sector people or consortium. You still want to benefit from having a network of big value, like let's say Bitcoin or Ethereum to be the settlement layer, but then you want to run your immediate business transactions or important things that you care about, or let's say you want to maintain confidentiality on a different network. But then this is where also cross-chain or interoperability comes in the picture. Most other cases surely we're seeing is having this access to larger liquidity. Again, Interlay is a good example here because you're benefiting from the fact that you have Bitcoin being the provider of the biggest value by market cap, and then you surely have Moonbeam, for instance, as well. This is where DeFi can expand across all these multiple networks, and there's on the top of that there's a bit of a debate here whether because you mentioned security and attacks, which is a major issue, and it's been highlighted a couple of months back, I believe was Vitalik Peter talked about whether it's going to be across chain bridges or it's going to be multi-chain, and the idea here is sort of, it sounds that at least for a while we need to rely on bridges unless we actually achieve that ultimate interoperability status where maybe there would be better standards. There would be a lot to sort of I think there would be a lot of iterations. If we go back to Polkadot itself as a interoperability built for interoperability from the ground up, you could have thought that Ethereum maybe being built as a parachain, as it's just all it is, just a portal, which is maybe Moonbeam is the direct Moonbeam, I guess. But that's maybe another scenario where, okay, why not actually Ethereum still kind of connect to Polkadot, for instance, as a parachain. So there'll be different architectures around how this would work, but it will start with iterations or having better standards built on the top of what we had today.
Yeah, for sure. And now that you've sort of brought up Parachains and the architecture, I want to dive a little bit deeper into that. I'll go to you, Gregory, for this one. Can you kind of break down your thoughts on the Parachain like architecture concept? Do you think all the Parachains kind of need to do it all? Like, are they built to be specialized for specific set of use cases, or do you think they're built for kind of commercialization for a wide variety of use cases?
This is a tricky one to answer because I think at the moment probably the ecosystem isn't large enough for a lot of specialized parachains. I think. So what I've seen, for example, on Kusama, is particularly evident from Akala and Moonbeam. Of course, there are obviously they're bridged and can transfer assets, but I believe like they employ a lot of the same components. So they kind of do some of the same stuff. There's some overlap. There's some difference, of course. But I think as the ecosystem grows larger, I think more projects will begin to specialize. For instance, one consideration even we took was, do we put an EVM or maybe even ink or something on our chain? Because obviously cross-chain there is an overhead there, do we also kind of roll that ourselves, or do we rely on another parachain to kind of afford us that kind of infrastructure? And I think for the time being, the answer to that for us has been like, let's focus on other things, more specialized to our project, and perhaps we can build on that later. But certainly at the moment, I think there's not a huge amount of specialization. That being said, there are obviously particular reasons you would go to Akala or Moonbeam, or obviously for us, KBTC is our very specialized use case, so we have some specialization there. But yeah, I think we'll see more of that as more projects are onboarded to onto the relay chains.
Yeah, I mean, I think fair enough. A lot of these technologies on Polkadot, like XCM, just recently went live, so we're still seeing the effects of that. Alen, do you sort of agree that things are less specialized right now, or do you think they are specialized? Like, I know there's Remark and others that only focus on NFTs, things like that.
Yeah, well, I think it depends on the point of view, what you look at. For me, like, it's definitely going into the specialization part, and I think it's important to go that direction. Mostly because, yeah, you mentioned before about Parachain being kind of building blocks, and I think it's something we realize even, as a kid, when you start to work with building blocks, you realize that this is how you start to innovate. Basically, you have those blocks and you start to build things, and that's how you actually start to build something big with just those simple blocks. But you also see that having those kind of different blocks allows you to build a different also set or a different construction at the end. And I think as an adult, we also see that, because especially as a software developer, you rely on modules, libraries, all those kind of blocks you put together. And every time I try to think about Polkadot Parachain, I see like those blocks being put together. And as I mentioned before, like in the case, in the scenario of the game, definitely what's interesting is that each parachain is offering a kind of specialized like feature, because usually those features are trade-off. You cannot be like the perfect blockchain, unfortunately. We don't have the technology for that, or it would require at least some new breakthrough. But right now it's about doing trade-off. And I think it's important that, Parachain are specializing in very like specific features. And they have basically, and they offer those through like XCM, through cross-chain, which is already like the case in some of the features. For example, we are right now just starting to offer the EVM access through XCM. So we're testing like other parachains, sending directly EVM instruction in our parachain. And I think that's where the beauty will be in Polkadot, is into the operation between the specialization of each parachain.
Yeah, great to hear your thoughts. Mohamed, do you have anything to add, your perspectives?
Yeah, so Polkadot started initially with the idea that it's a sharded network just to mitigate the scalability challenges that, for example, seen in Ethereum being slow and doesn't scale. The bar chain on Polkadot are still sovereign networks. They're quite independent in their own. So they still have the capacity to provide a general purpose blockchain, and a number of them are like this. But it's also tricky, like it's mentioned, as in being early, everyone trying to find their own sort of specialization in a way. If you look at the categories of parachain on, let's say, on parachains with info, you see tags like IoT, layer 2, zero knowledge proof. So there's still some element of maybe offering a unique functionality or a unique feature where you might think of it as, if you think of it as a cohesive ecosystem, and rather than building a feature that's already been created, why not just use the fact that you can seamlessly, transact or, talk to other parachains over the relay chain. So I don't have to repeat myself in that instance and just focus on what I could do best. And that's probably just short of my perspective here.
Yeah, no, I like hearing all three of your sort of different perspectives, because I don't think it's all figured out yet, but as things are growing, I have heard a lot of people talk about Parachains should maybe work more collaboratively. Now that we've sort of broken down, the architecture, you guys have all talked to us a little bit about the benefits. Since everyone here is building sort of with the community and actually hands-on building, I sort of want to talk about, the tech side of it, the community side of it, and maybe even some of the challenges you guys are going through. I'll turn it over to Gregory first. Do you want to talk a little bit about, what are some of the things you look for in terms of attracting developers either to your project or, convincing them to sort of build on Polkadot, and maybe how does like the Polkadot technology per se kind of drive in innovation?
So I'm perhaps not the best person to start, but for this, particularly because I guess my Parachain is not entirely developer focused, at least at this point in time, comparatively with like Akaba and Moonbeam, which offer smart contracting engines. They're a bit more developer focused from sort of the contractor perspective. But of course, we have all of our code open source, and we do welcome contributions to the core layer one Substrate code base. In terms of attracting people to Substrate, I think Parity and Web3 Foundation even do the best job with this. We ourselves were attracted to Substrate and Polkadot by the Web3 Foundation. We were one of the first grant recipients in 2019, and so we developed the first prototype sort of into B2C chain through that program, and it's kind of expanded from there. And I believe many other teams also experienced a similar kind of starting route. Parity also do a great job of kind of support, like we have now, like the Stack Exchange to help answer like beginners' questions, or hopefully allow people to more easily search common pitfalls of working with Substrate. And that's I think makes a lot of the kind of development a lot easier. And being one of the largest Rust code bases, as I mentioned before, also attracts a lot of Rust developers from Web2. So I think that's also something to note.
For sure. And Gregory, is there anything specifically about the tech that you think drives more innovation, like compared to something like EVM, where some developments are slow? Because, like, for example, I've seen attempts for people to try to bring DeFi through Ethereum onto Bitcoin, but like they haven't made a lot of progress. So do you want to maybe talk about that a bit?
Yeah, I think Alen Mohamed mentioned this before regarding like Ethereum's a bit more slow in terms of like its development nature, whereas Polkadot and Substrate is quite fast paced, and I wouldn't say anymore they have the mentality of move fast and break things, but certainly up until recently that was a bit more predominant. And even then, like we have some pretty cool technology, such as like the newest metadata change v14, which allows kind of us as low-level devs to break stuff a bit more easily, and to have it not break downstream systems in a way that can't be fixed easily. So I think that's like one of the main things. And yeah, the fact that projects are kind of siloed in a way. Obviously, they have the ability to talk over XCM, but that means that they can build like far more radical layer one based tech in a way that you couldn't obviously do with Ethereum, which is kind of a monolith in terms of its structure.
Yeah, no, awesome. Thank you for breaking that down. And I think that's a great thing for our viewers to understand what you said about it being siloed. I couldn't agree more, because yeah, with Ethereum, like everything you do, even these NFT mints, things like that, kind of can congest the entire network. So it's like can't do all the actions on Ethereum at once. I'll jump to you next, Alen. If you want to talk a little bit about how you're attracting developers, or even some of the challenges you face when like building cross chain.
Definitely. I mean, we really into it at this moment because it's like a big focus here in our team. And so talking about attracting developers, I think what's important is usually to well communicate on the future of Polkadot and the promise around, the cross chain. I think that's what's attracting a lot the developers and new projects. What I would love to see, in the coming months or years is like more and more parachains with additional features. That's something we really want to see, and that will attract also additional developers aside. One thing, for example, like a big project with features across already 2 or 3 parachains, would show like the real potential of Polkadot. And that's still coming, but we have, as it was mentioned, like there are some programs, there are some treasury that could be used. We're just waiting for someone, with a good idea, for some developers to try new things. And that's, I think, where Polkadot will shine and attract even more and more people. It's kind of a snowball effect that could happen if we get some kind of project doing that. Particularly on Moonbeam, I think we're lucky because we're focusing on Ethereum compatibility. So for us, it's always easier to take developers that have experience on Ethereum, and just by showing them already the features we added to the EVM related, to substrate features like the democracy system, staking, and now the cross chain is already like attractive for developers. So that helps. The next big step for them will be to provide them some tools around it. We're working with other chain on that, with Parity. There's a lot of ideas how we can provide tools to do those cross-chain operations, because there's a lot of potential, but without the tool, it makes it slow for developers, a bit frustrating. So that's where we need to improve, I think, right now.
Yeah, no, well said. And I think the work of your parachain can maybe benefit other parachains, so that not everyone has to build that same EVM compatibility, and vice versa. Everyone can like take a little from each one. Lastly, Mohamed, you can kind of end this question. I know you're focused on like using the substrate SDK and doing a lot of technical implementation. So how do you attract developers? And if you even want to talk about maybe some of the challenges attracting developers, getting people to build.
That specifically on substrate and the core network, or is more on the ICE network application developers?
Oh, anything, however you want to answer it.
We still sort of in the phase of building the achieving that sort of first solid version of the core runtime of ICE network. And that's primarily us with our partners just working on the core frontend development. But in terms of attracting, so in terms of who we target right now as a developer community is the application developers. Likewise, we also offer that EVM compatibility. We've not done like full-on 100% Ethereum portability like Moonbeam, for example, but we wanted to also have the two edges of the networks like WASM and INC, as well as EVM as well, because we do believe in that same mantra of EVM, Ethereum, our legacy, or maybe achieve the legacy status, but WASM and INC perhaps has a possible dominant feature in the Web3 domain. So we're launching things like a grant program where we start encourage people to start to build on the ecosystem, and we providing them with features like surely the BTD bridge is one aspect of that, because it allows that in the early phase, the bootstrapping our network will rely largely on the fact that we have the Archon network as a layer 1 already, sort of being the sister network of ICE. So that's kind of key for us. So we're targeting also not just Icon developer community, as well as the developers on the Polkadot ecosystem as well. So it's kind of another, I would say, blank slate and green field for people to start to innovate and try things. And as you said, like move fast, maybe break things as well. We still, as we are, on the testnet phase. So.
Yeah, move fast, break things in a silo, right? Like Gregory said. I think that's pretty good.
Not in the mainnet for sure.
Yeah, not in the mainnet. Yeah, no, that's cool. And I think for some of the developers listening or people that want to develop, I would just say in general, there's so many opportunities, other layer one blockchains just to start learning, and there's tons of resources. Yeah, the last question, maybe before I ask you guys for like your last bit of advice, just want you all to kind of go around and talk a little bit about what are some of the active use cases on Polkadot that either you guys are using, daily, or you suggest people start to use so they can see the value. I'll start with you again, Gregory. If you just want to break down like what would be helpful for people that are watching this and maybe have never used a Polkadot dApp or something like that.
Yeah, actually, just to jump back to the last kind of question quickly, I think in my head I was associating kind of developers with application development, but of course, in like across many projects, there's loads of ways for developers to get stuck in terms of the APIs, and I think Mohamed just mentioned this with like treasuries and grant proposals, and like you can, I think for developers who are keen to get into the space, I mean, we ourselves have a treasury and bug bounty program, but I believe also Polkadot, Moonbeam, and many others also employ kind of separate treasuries, which will encourage kind of development around the ecosystem and tools and sort of integrations with that tech. So that'd be super interesting for a lot of people, I think, to get started. So to go back to, the question at hand on sort of things I would encourage people to start doing right now. I think the main thing would be to experiment on Kusama. Like, it's a canary net, yes, there's obviously tokens have value, but for the most part, like things may break, but you're rewarded with higher return opportunities. And also, I think one thing I found, especially with a lot of different teams, is that everyone's always very friendly, and like if there are problems or bugs, like we ourselves are always happy to help and debug issues and try and find ways to like recover funds on our chain, and other teams I think do the same. So I'd encourage you to just experiment with Kusama first, because let's expect chaos is the motto. So just go crazy. On our side, like we have a few opportunities which are particularly interesting. So for like the vaults, so for the Bitcoin custody, we have this kind of whole vault system set up, and so we highly encourage people to kind of look at our docs, docs.interlay.io, and download and run a vault. And these are kind of the custodians of Bitcoin on our network. And we welcome obviously feedback from developers who try this or maybe even find ways for it to be improved. And there's I think also other great opportunities across the other projects as well, doing similar things.
Yeah, awesome. We all know how important tokenized vaults are to the ecosystem at large. Next, I'll go to you, Alen, if you want to talk a little bit about what are some use cases, applications that you recommend people start to use so they can kind of see the value themselves hands-on.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, Substrate is built, very well so that it's easy to start things locally. You can, test a lot of their palettes. They have a lot of tutorials, so people can easily play with it. I think also there are some public network, like for Moonbeam, we have the AlphaNet. That is an easy place for people to play with even Polkadot.js, to understand what are the different palettes, and because it has no economy associated with it, people can try whatever they want. Like, we got a lot of people that want to do that. And if people are interested into building a parachain, we also like onboard other parachains in AlphaNet, so they don't have to worry, about breaking things. Like, because I know Kusama is supposed to be a test network, but now with the value associated with it, with the regulation, the rules around it, it's still sometimes a bit slow, or it's not matching what you want. So that's why we usually invite people to come to our AlphaNet and test their parachain there, because it's okay if they break it. I mean, so far no one really was able to do that, so that's good. But we have probably like 15 parachains already there. And yes, and we usually encourage people to share their ideas with us, because we meet with other teams. We try to give them advice about our experience with Substrate and Polkadot, because we had some blips on the way. It happened to us on Kusama. Starting a network happened. I think every parachain experienced this at least once, an emergency situation. So it's good to share that experience. And yeah, so I think there's a lot of possible way to try, depending of your experience, depending of what you want to do. But communicating and asking, either Parity or the Parachain team is definitely also a good thing to do to get started on your ideas. Yes.
Yeah, that's great to hear. Like, for our students out there listening, or even new builders, I really like hearing this, where even if you're new to the ecosystem, it sounds like you can get a lot of hands-on support. And it sounds like everyone here is kind of is welcoming that hands-on support. So love it. But yeah, lastly, I'll go to you, Mohamed, before I ask you all for your departing advice.
Yes, similarly, so all the good points have been mentioned by Gregory and Alen. And on the top of that, there's when you first time start with Substrate, and I've been on this for about 6 months now, it can be a little bit overwhelming. There's a lot of material, the Sub-Zero conferences and all these online useful information. Actually, I've been reading even resources on when we started on Interlay website, as well as Moonbeam. And there's the Parity and the wikis on the Polkadot network as well, because on the network is lots of resources. The features that is really appealing to me as well, and when I start to look at is things like XCM as something that to try, like token. The thing to see the power of Parachain, for example, testing something like token teleportation, for instance, or asset teleportation in XCM, as well as maybe testing that on even your own private parachain. You can do that, set up this easily using something like Polkadot launch locally. And beside all these materials and resources, we've been also just supporting active materials on ICE Network IO as well, the website. So that's so the space, as you can see, is just becoming like a Wikipedia of networks, linking each other, and there's lots of resources out there.
Yeah, all those applications and even those like websites that allow people to easily navigate, super important. I agree. Yeah, to kind of end things off on this panel, maybe each of you can give your 30 seconds to 1 minute best advice you can give to people that are building on Polkadot and kind of newer into the ecosystem. I'll start with you, Gregory.
I think we've covered quite a lot of sort of things you could do anyways, but I guess it would be good to summarize. Obviously, reach out to teams over Discord. We're quite active with our community, and we highly encourage questions and people investigating how the system works, because it obviously also refreshes our knowledge and allows us to impart wisdom on the community. Parity, or rather, the Substrate team have the Stack Exchange wiki, Stack Exchange for answering questions. So developers should obviously go and check those if they have any questions about building layer 1. And I think Mohamed that also mentioned just before, like most teams now have pretty good documentation. Feel free to check those out before you get started, and to circle back, ask questions, and we're super excited to hear from you.
Yeah, awesome. Alen, you can go next.
Yeah, well, I think they already shared a lot of good ideas and opinion, and I think I just want to add that right now I think it's the perfect timing to learn about XCM and to think also about what could be done with it. You don't need to always be a very strong developer or to know exactly how everything is working, but if you already start by having a good idea, then you can communicate, learn how it can be implemented, and if it matches actually the kind of rules or the the features associated with XCM. And I think right now is really the perfect time for that, because it's something that's going to grow a lot. And yeah, and it's going to be very like exponential, the amount of possibilities coming with it.
And the bear market doesn't help learning and getting educated for sure. Mohamed, you can take us out on this one.
Yeah, so from my own experience, was primarily working with Rust. It can be, if you don't have the Rust knowledge and background, and if you're not working out for a number of years, it may take a while to build that expertise, and it can be pretty steep. And learning Rust and Substrate in the same time, that's even like, that's even harder. So if someone is picking up Rust for the first time, I would advise just spend time first, learn the language fundamentals, understand it, how it's different from other paradigms, and then look into Substrate. There's a good number of introductions about the syntax in Substrate as well, because it's macro heavy, as in it's sort of a language in itself, the way it's designed. And look at the tools that might help as well, using something like Visual Studio and Rust Analyzer to be able to see, get some, or to complete or be able to understand the APIs, because it can be it can be quite involved for someone not seeing this before, seeing it for the first time.
Great advice. Thank you all for your time here. I learned a lot. And yeah, I hope for our audience, you guys enjoyed us talking about protocol development, and stay tuned. We have more interviews coming at Reimagine v13. Thank you all.